years and years and years, and we'd go after Sunday morning services, pack up, and there's a baptism, and then I'd come out from Sunday school, and then we're off, we're going to go, we're not hanging around today. And back in those days, people didn't hang around anyway. I realized this. I get home like 1:30. Actually, Lewis isn't here. Lewis, if you're watching, I'm going home early today. No, I guess. But we were chatting. I enjoyed chatting with them. I'm not saying that in the least. I actually enjoy hanging around and chatting. But people here, we're like 12:30, 1 o'clock. People are going home. Man, I think when I grew up, if we got home at 12 o'clock, we were like late. Man, this is like, we would get home at like 11:45, 11:30, 11:45. Anyway, come out from Sunday school, we're like, man, we're going to the lake. There's a baptism today, and go up to there and go up to the lake, and there'd be, a group of the church that would go up. The majority of everyone that came to church on that morning would go up to the baptism. Like the whole church would go, and there'd be a group of 70 or 80 people that were that'd be at the baptistry. And I'd always position myself as a kid and even as a teenager. I would position myself in the middle of the group because I just always felt self-conscious going to the lake in my Sunday morning church clothes, and then everyone else is there swimming at the lake, and we're in the church clothes. And but that was just me, just the timid, shy boy hiding amongst the greater group that was there. But one thing for sure that would always take place at the lake, I can't remember which order this took place, but the choir would always sing. And my dad, being the song leader back then, he'd have I think it's right to call it a ghetto blaster from the 80s. I don't know what they call it. But it was, used to sit back here for a while, but it was like a big old tape deck, boom box. Yeah, the thing in the 80s that they used to go down the street, like that was like all the cool thing. Yeah, well, that was our church. We were cool and hip back in the 80s. Had one of those as well on my dad's shoulder. And there it was, put the tape deck in, and you press play, and there it had. Changed the big old double D batteries, put it in to make sure it was working. And he'd have it on there, and then the choir'd gather around, and they'd sing the same song every single time. The Lighthouse. There is a lighthouse on a hilltop that overlooks life's seas, and whatever the rest of the words go on to say. And it wasn't for that lighthouse, where would this ship be? But they'd sing, and the choir would sing down there at the lake we'd baptize right by the canoe, where the canoes are, and be baptized there. I got baptized there. That's where I got baptized, and some people even here got baptized at that very area. And they'd sing, and the choir would sing, and I can't remember whether the choir sang at the end or they sang at the beginning, but I do know that Pastor Thrush always would get up, and he would read a passage from the Bible, and he would say a few words right before they'd go out, and depending on what season it was, sometimes they'd go a long way out because it was not very deep, and then keep going and going and going. And they'd go out and baptize there before he'd read a passage from the Bible, and he'd say some words. Everyone's gathered around. Well, of course, a bit of a spectacle on a Sunday afternoon, lunchtime, there at Lake Leschenoltia. 70 or 80 people dressed very differently than everyone else that's there at the lake, and they're watching and observing and seeing what is happening here. And I remember one time there was a heckler that called out, and their call out was, "Can you walk on water?" was the heckle, and the Pastor Thrush just said, "No, can you?" And that was sort of how it was, and there I was there, and it wasn't necessarily the most wittiest of responses, but I remember just there in the middle of as I was in the middle of the group, thinking, man, that was a bold answer. He wasn't fazed at all by the heckler, and then they went on and went out and baptized. But that still thinks that guy calling out, never even saw who it was, just a voice coming from somewhere. "Can you walk on water?" And I was thinking of that story as I came to this one here with Peter and Jesus. And though we might not walk on water, I believe genuinely, wholeheartedly, that Peter did walk on water. I believe that. One of the fundamentals of the faith and what we get called fundamentalists for is that there was a time in the early 1900s where the basic tenets of Christianity were being challenged. And some of those basic tenets was the virgin birth. It was the deity of Christ. It was also around miracles, about whether the miracles are actually true or whether they were just stories that were impart a particular spiritual truth. But in the fundamentalists, and they were Presbyterian in those days, and the Baptists, they were like, no, we believe that it's fundamentally true to the Christian faith that those miracles actually took place. And I believe that those miracles actually took place. Oh, that's crazy. Hang on, we're talking about the same Jesus who is the Word made flesh, who made the world in which we live. If you believe that he made the world, can he not have power over the world in which he makes? Absolutely he can. And so as he walks upon those waters, we have this story. Can you walk on water? Peter learnt that day he could walk on water. He actually could. Now the story backs up a little bit. Because it plays into the same day. I'm amazed, I think I said this previously, but I'm amazed that when you read the Bible, and especially the Gospels, it has so much of the life of Jesus, but when you actually look at the 3.5 years that Jesus walked around in his earthly ministry, as much as we have so much, we actually have very little, because a lot of times we get the same stories. And we also find that there are big chunks that are just missing. If you were to read John's gospel, he primarily deals with around the Passover time. And so it's really just how he interacts around Jerusalem and pretty much forgets all the things that take place in Galilee and up the north. And so you only get this little period of time every year that you get in Jesus' life. And there's not much else beyond that. Then you have in Matthew, he deals primarily with Galilee and what's taking place in Galilee, as does Mark and Luke. They are there in that passage, that time and that period, but you don't actually get too much. And then you get big chunks where it's like, okay, this is distracted again. Do you know what? It's a good day today. Heiko is just pulling up. That a blessing? It's good to see him soon. Anyway, I get distracted. This is good. Now let me chase a complete rabbit for a second. When my parents first became Christians, they would go to Esperance. We were in Munglanup. It was 120 kilometers, and they'd go to Esperance. They went to the People's Church in Esperance, and Esperance called the Bay of Isles, right? Well, the hall that they rented, I don't even know what the hall was called, but apparently, I was just a little guy, but the front wall, like here, this wall, was glass, and it looked out over the Bay of Isles, which would be incredibly distracting. Could you imagine just sitting here? This is a glass wall, and then the boats and the bay on a sunny day is just laid out there, and you're trying to pay attention to what's taking place. That would be very difficult to do. So I get it in reverse. So good to see you, Heiko, Mildred, Louis. So very good to see you all. Yes. We're in Matthew chapter number 14. It's good to see you on your feet. It is. Is that not a blessing to see him? I've been praying for you. I've been praying your whole family. It has been an absolute blessing. So, in the story, we get to this, that so much of Jesus' life, we think that we get a lot of it. Actually, we get very little of it. We just get little slices here and there. And even though this is chapter 14, deals with the feeding of the 5,000, it deals with the death of John the Baptist, it deals with the Peter walking on water, and yet all of that took place in pretty much the same 24-hour period. That we find that he hears about John the Baptist being beheaded, and then they say we need to get away and just get away for a little bit, and they get away, and then the whole multitude follow him, and they go about an hour distance, and they go in boat, but they find out where he is, and they go about the 1.5 hour walk to where Jesus is. They meet him there, and there's multitudes. He goes to get away, and there's people everywhere, and so he addresses them and talks to them. Luke says that he focused on teaching them about the kingdom, and he was doing miracles, and then they get to the end of the day and they're hungry, and we looked at this last Sunday night. They're hungry, they're famished, and there's no food because they just randomly, it wasn't a planned adventure. They just heard that Jesus was gone. They went, so they went with him. and so never really packed anything for lunch and things like that. And then they were hungry, and Mark says that he looked upon them and sees them as sheep having no shepherds, and he has them sit down. And then we also learned that John tells us that Jesus knew what he was going to do, but he challenges the disciples. He says, "What should we do here?" But he himself knew what he was going to do. He knew he was going to feed with them with a miracle. And they said, "We just have 5 loaves, 2 small fish." John also tells us that they did this miracle, and he fed the 5,000 and the women and the children, and they were all fed. And then the 12 baskets comes back, and they were amazed by it. And it was such a defining moment in their lives that everyone experienced this, that John says that they were willing to forcibly take Jesus and make him king. Like, they said, "Whoa, this is amazing." And then John also tells us that they followed him the next day and even into the synagogue period, that they were chasing him because they wanted to see more miracles and they wanted to see more food. "Hey, you fed us yesterday. That was a pretty cool trick. Can you do it again today?" And so they saw it. It had a lasting impression upon them about what Jesus did and how he's fed them, but also upon the disciples. They're thinking, "Man, we were there. We handed the food out. We're the ones." It was Philip, I think, or Andrew or Philip. One of them is the one that brought the lad with the lunch. They bring the lad. They said, "We saw what it looked like originally." And then Jesus divides it out, and we start handing it out. We keep coming back to Jesus, and we take more and serve more people. We served it with our very hands, and now we collected it. We collected 12 basketfuls at the end. We saw this. We don't know how it happened. We don't know how it took place, but we experienced it. We saw it, and I don't know how it mesmerized them. And they're thinking about that. Now, Jesus says, it says here in this passage, straightway, verse 22, Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him into the other side, and while he sent them away. This is amazing as well. There's thousands of people here. Now, if there was thousands, 5,000 men, and let's say there's another 5,000 women and children. Maybe it was mainly men, but either way, let's say between 5,000 and 10,000 people. If there was a preacher today that had a crowd of 5,000 or 10,000 people, we'd call them a mega pastor or a mega church, right? Thousands of people. This is a mega church. And you know what those pastors of the mega churches have? They have security. Bodyguards, and interact. I mean, he is a big name and a big person. He doesn't interact with the thousands of the people. No, he sort of comes in from the green room. Churches have green rooms. Can you imagine that they have green rooms? But they do. That is a true story. We could paint it green. Yeah, we could be cool and hip and say we have a green room. If you don't like TV stations have green rooms where it's the waiting room before you come on and do your segment. That's called the green room. Well, churches have these green rooms where they're out in there and they come on their stage and it's their time on the stage. Anyway, so oftentimes those preachers go in the green room, they come out on stage, they go back to, they're never actually in the front. And there's bodyguards and protection and all of this. Jesus has these 12 disciples that are with him, and he says, "Men, get in the boat and go across ahead of me. Get out of here." And it says straightway, as soon as they collected 12 baskets. And I find this amazing. Verse 22, straightway Jesus constrained his disciples to get into the ship and to go before him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away. I'll deal with these people. It's fine. You guys go. I'll interact with them. And he's the one that dismissed the multitude and he sent them away. He didn't need these bodyguards and he didn't need people that his supervisors and his overlookers. Jesus just had a way, even with the thousands of people, to deal with them personally. He wasn't overwhelmed and he was able to deal with them, dismiss the crowd, and then he went off to the mountain to pray. Is what takes place. And so they go out, and they're out maybe 6 p.m. in the evening, maybe. They set sail to row back across. But in that area, if you know anything about the topography, the geography of that area of Israel, the Sea of Galilee, could have put it on the screen if I thought about this. The Sea of Galilee is in the north of Israel. At the very base of the Sea of Galilee is the Jordan River. It's a little tiny creek, muddy creek, that goes all the way down into the Dead Sea at the very bottom. Well, the Dead Sea is the lowest, it's not elevation. What's the opposite of elevation? Is it? Is this so negative elevation? It's the lowest place. It's below sea level, the Dead Sea. It's the lowest place. Everything funnels into it. So even when you go up the Jordan River, even the Sea of Galilee is still low, and there's terrain on either side. Because it's low, the winds come in, apparently, particularly from the west, and as it comes in, and the sea is somewhat shallow, and its deepest point is about 43 meters, but a lot of it is shallower than that, and because of the winds that come through, and because it's low and all of these sort of things, I don't understand what I'm saying to you. I'm just parroting to you what I was reading this week, and because of these things, the wind comes, and within an hour, what can be calm, as soon as the winds come, that sea can get very choppy. And they're not out there in big Lux cruisers and big ships. They're in little sea vessels, much like that. And all of a sudden, the waves are now meters high, and it's whipped up by the wind. And it's very boisterous. And it says that the wind was contrary. They're starting again from the map in the north, and they're trying to get across to the western shore, but the winds are coming in from the west. So they're going nowhere all night. And in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus comes unto them, and they're rowing, and they're rowing, and they're rowing, and they're going nowhere. They're going backwards, and they're going forwards, and they're just in the middle of the sea thinking, man, this is not working at all. Waves billowing, and the wind boisterous, and the wind contrary to them. And in that scene, Jesus comes walking out casually. Now, I don't know how that works. I don't know what that would have looked like. Was he going up on the waves and down on the waves and up on the next wave and down? I don't know. Was he just sort of like walking through it all at an even? I don't know how it works. But it just says, and Jesus came walking to them on the water. And he comes out to them, and they see him, and they say, it's a spirit. They thought it was a phantom, a ghost, or something like a premonition, and they were more afraid by seeing what they thought was a spirit than they were by the actual waves, and they were afraid with the waves. And then that cried out with fear, and then Jesus immediately, straightway, hey, don't be afraid. Be of good cheer. Men, it's I, the Master. It's Jesus. Man, we thought the feeding of the 5,000 was amazing just a few hours ago. Now he's walking on water. And as soon as they realized it was Jesus, man, the comfort that came to their heart, the joy that came to them, even in the midst of the storm. And then Peter says, oh, don't we love Peter? Peter says, Lord, if it be you, bid that I come to thee. Let me come out walking on the water to you. And Jesus said, come out here. And then Peter, man, you can just imagine that little boat there, they're rocking around, and Peter literally says, he climbs out over it, and he climbs down. I'd imagine he's feeling it as he's holding on. He's feeling it solid, and he lets go. And he's walking, and there's Jesus. He's not even paying attention. Just a few, there's Jesus. And he's like off the boat, and it's probably letting it go. And then he's taking a step, looking back at his boys. Hey, look at me, yay! Looking at Jesus. And then that easterly wind, he says, and then the wind that he was the waves, he could do the waves, but then that wind maybe was just too strong, and he starts thinking about the wind pushing against him and the waves, and as the hard floor moves beneath his feet, however that might work, and he's there. And then he looks at the circumstances and begins to sink, and cries out, Lord, save me, as he starts to go down, and he saves him. It's a wonderful story. But out of it, it's not just a story. It's not just something that's like a fairy tale. Like we come and hear in church, and I'm sure there are some places in some churches that are liberal and say, oh, we don't want to. It's the things that we can learn out of the story. But I want to say to you again and remind you that we believe that God made the world, we believe that he has power over the world, that he can do miracles. And he was walking on the water, and I do genuinely believe that Peter also walked on the water for at least a few steps, and for a moment in time, he walked on the water. I believe that. And we might be here going, yes, I believe that as well. All right, would you get out of the boat? I mean, how strong is your faith? Because it's one thing to intellectually assent and say, I believe that Peter walked on the water. It's another thing to actually climb over the side of the boat and put your feet on the raging sea. But Peter literally got out of the boat. And I was reading last week in preparation for last Sunday night, and somewhere in it, some phrase stuck with me, that there's really two types of people. There are those that are in the boat, there are the disciples, and there was probably the other 11 that are sitting very firmly going, go at it, Peter, where we support you in your adventure. And Peter goes and does it. But there are the other 11 that are like, man, they are boat bound. Man, they're staying in the boat. They're happy and content as much in the boat. And Peter, though, willing to go a step further, steps out. And he also got to a stage where he started to sink in the sea. He was sea sunk. That's a terrible way of saying it, but it's just sort of what stuck with me. You have sort of these two sort of groups. You have one that is boat bound, and you have another one that ends up being sea sunk. That if you get out of the boat, you are now placing yourself at risks that you might never have experienced before. And faith is strong in those first few steps. And then the wind kicks in and the waves kick in and you realize, what am I doing here? And he starts to sink. And there's so much for us to learn from this. But I want to focus in on one main point this morning. I'll give you just a couple of thoughts here before we go any further. Is firstly, that in Peter we can learn that the mixed character of the believer. Don't think that your faith is going to be strong all the time. There's going to be times where you have strong faith that you're going to willing to get out of the boat, yes, and then you find out that the circumstances of life pile upon you and the winds beat upon you, and all of a sudden you find yourself sinking underneath the waves, crying out to Jesus to be saved again because of just the overwhelming circumstances. I love the story of Abraham because when we went through Abraham a few years ago, just the up and down nature of Abraham. We look at Abraham and say, man, what a man of faith. Like he is the man of faith in the Bible. Like we really are men of Abraham, and he is great example for us. But if you look at his life, he made so many mistakes. He went down to Egypt when he shouldn't have gone down. As soon as a famine came, he went down to Egypt. And then when he's down in Egypt, they get Hagar. And you know, as a handmaid, you know the issues that Hagar comes about. While he's there, he says to Sarah, his wife, now don't tell Pharaoh that you're my wife. Tell him that you're my sister, and all the complications and problems that came about that. And then he finally realizes, and after that, it's like, all right, after packing everybody up and moving his whole household down into Egypt, he's down there but a very short amount of time, and he has to sort of eat humble pie, tell his household, we're packing up, we're moving again, we're going back to the promised land, should never have come down here, this is not where God wants us. And so he had to pack everything up and move north again, back to where he should have been. And then you find later on in life, he ends up with the guy out in the Philistine area, out by the coast. Oh, anyway, whoever it was, guess what he says to him? We're scared about this, so if we go in there, wife, just say that you're my sister. He goes and does the exact same issue that he did in Egypt. It never worked out for him in Egypt. It didn't work out with him when he does it again later on in life. And you look at Abraham's life, when you actually look at it, you realize it's not just this one continual upward walk of faith that just got better and better and better. No, there were some deep declines that he didn't walk by faith, and there were issues that came about as it. And it was up and it's down. And if we can learn anything from Abraham and from Peter, two men that we hold in high regard, that our Christian walk is going to be up and it's going to be down. It's going to be moments of big, strong faith, and then there's going to be times where the circumstances of life, maybe it's our own sinful nature, maybe it's our own lack of dependence upon God, whatever it might be, we all of a sudden find ourselves going down again. And in those moments of going down, understand this, Peter knows what you're experiencing. Abraham knows what you're experiencing. We all know what you're experiencing because we all go through these ups and the downs. This is the very character of being a believer. It's not always upward faith and just getting stronger and stronger. The trajectory should be of our life should be upwards and onwards, but there's going to be times where it's not always upwards. So when you go through those downs and you're beating yourself up, just acknowledge and realize, hey God, I need help here. And I'm experiencing the same lack of faith that so many of the mighty men that have gone before me have experienced as well. One moment walking on the water, the next sinking and crying out for help. Another thought that we can take from this is that faith really does work wonders. That we can, as Christians, actually attempt things that seem impossible, but with the mighty hand of God become possible. God is able to do the impossible. Faith really does move mountains. Faith really does move the hand of kings. Faith really does do amazing things. And it's not just faith in faith, it's faith in the living God who ultimately does amazing things. So faith really does work wonders. Peter learnt that day. What a 24-hour period. Feeding 5,000, walking on the water. In one of the passages, it says that the sea went calm, and I think in maybe Mark's account or Luke's account, then they were immediately at the shore. Well, that's pretty miraculous as well. This is kind of just thrown in there. Well, if you go from the middle of the sea, and then everything's calm, and then you're at the shoreline, that's pretty miraculous. So there's a whole heap of things that are taking place in that 24-hour period that is just amazing. God does it. God did amazing things. So he says, but here's the point that I want to get across here. And this is where the venturesome comes from. It's not really a word we use very much, venturesome. But I got it from Spurgeon using it, and I was reading a sermon of his. And he said this, that faith loves venturesome service. Faith loves venturesome service. What do you mean by venturesome? Well, we have another word that fits very much like venturesome, adventure. Faith loves adventure. Do you love adventure? We've got one adventure person back there. But to do adventures and to go on adventures and to go exploring and to do amazing things. So some of us are more adventurous than others. I've got 5 kids. They're not all as adventurous as each other. I think Gemma, would you go on a roller coaster? Yes, she wants to go hot air ballooning, she wants to go roller coasting and whatever else. Maddie, who is not in this room, so we can pick on her. Maddie, not so much. She's a girl that likes her feet on the ground. She's not going on roller coasters. She's probably not going to go hot air ballooning, those sort of things. Like, no. Because what about all the different things that could possibly go wrong? Sure. And you think about all those things, all of a sudden you're not doing anything. And now you're stuck and you're doing nothing. You know, there is 11 men sitting in a boat thinking about all the things that could go wrong if they got off and got out in the middle of a storm to walk to Jesus. They were looking at the waves, they were looking at the wind, they were thinking about how much they weigh and what the density of the water is. They were thinking about all of those things, and it kept them boat bound. If you start thinking about all the things that could possibly go wrong, you will not ever do anything. You'll be so scared to do anything if you're thinking like that. Now, I am by nature a little bit more like Maddie. I don't mind roller coasters and all of that sort of stuff. And I don't mind that sort of adventure. But again, if you built a roller coaster in your backyard, I'm not going on it. But there is definitely some people be like, yeah, I'll go on it, build it for me, and I will do it. I'm like, no, but if it's built by there's at least government certificates and it's in a first world country that I trust, then I will go on a roller coaster. But there are some places I won't go on a roller coaster. So it depends, and I'm thinking through those things. But I'm not really a risk taker. I'm a calculated sort of guy. I want to find out, hey, even when I spend money or I don't go into debt and we're going to spend money, if it's going to make sure that we're going to get a return on investment, we're not just throwing it away and we can afford it. And it's not going to, man, I calculate all these things. That's like how I live and how I operate is I like to sort of, in some ways, control the narrative. And not in a controlling way, but you know what I mean? By just like, man, I want to make sure that it's all going to be good before I ever go ahead and step out and do something. But faith in its very nature is venturesome. It's willing to venture out and do something even though the risks are high. Man, I'm going to go do this. We're going to step out. We're going to get out of the boat. Hey, we may sink, but the person that's getting out of the boat, the person that's going to do the big thing, in that moment, they're not actually thinking, we're going to sink. But the very real risk is that they might sink in this. And Peter found out, and he started to sink. He started to be falling in the ocean here and going through the water. But a venturesome is a person who is bold and willing to take risks or an action or behavior that involves potential danger. Would you be willing, if God called you to do something, are you willing to do it regardless of the cost? Because again, now we're getting back to, let's bring it back into not just away from roller coasters, but bring it back into everyday life. If God called you to do something, if God placed upon your heart, and you know after prayer and seeking God, this is the leading of God, that He is in this, it still takes faith to actually get out of the boat, to actually do what God is calling you to do, that you have permission of God to do. This is not just about tempting God and saying, I'm going to get over the boat and I'm going to try and twist your arm that you now have to save me. No, it's not about getting into risky and dangerous situations. It's about putting ourselves in following the leadership of God. Okay, this is where God wants me to go. This is the direction He wants me to do. Right, I'm going to get out of the boat and risk failing to follow Jesus. I'm not naturally like that. My big risk in life was packing up when I was 20 years of age and going to America, going to a different country and not knowing anyone. If that wasn't the clear leading of God in my life, I don't think I would have done that. But I went knowing, hey, God, you're leading me in this direction. And I was praying about it, and I had surrendered to the ministry and surrendered to whatever God would have, and He had called me and placed a call in the direction of my life when I was 18 years of age, and that was a big step of faith, to take a step and say, God, I trust you. But you know what? Even in that, it was still staying in a boat. It was still sort of a comfortable and just making an assent to say, yeah, I'm gonna submit to God, and I'm gonna follow God, and whatever that might be. I'm gonna be a preacher, and I'm gonna go to ministry, and I'm surrendering to that. Well, 2 years went by. I graduated high school, and I was 18, and then 19, and I was working at Farmer Jack's supermarkets, and I was working at the Stratton store, and I was working at the Midland store. Both of those are no longer Farmer Jack's. One is completely gone. I think one is now a Guzmani Gomez. I think it's in that same area. And the other one is an IGA over there in Stratton, but still there. And I was working between those two stores. I was just working the way through life. 4 a.m. in the morning till 8 o'clock in the morning, I was working at Stratton, and 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. I was working at Midland. And so I was up and down the hill, and that's what I was doing for those 2 years, sort of just waiting for the next stage of life, what to happen. And then in May of whatever year that was, 2002 or 2002, May of 2002, Bill Smith, a guy by the name of Bill Smith, the same Bill Smith that was just here last week in May, same period of time, mentioned, hey, there's a Bible college over there in Oklahoma City where I'm from. It's attached with the church that I go to. Never knew anything about the church, never knew anything about Oklahoma, didn't know anything about anything. But from that time in May to the time of actually getting off the plane in Oklahoma City in August, it's like, man, just one thing after another happened, and God just opened up the doors, and that's where it was. Like, man, this is where I'm going to go. And I was praying about it, and my dad gave me good advice. when I was 20 years of age, weighing up what I should do with my life and what next step should I take. And he said, I was in my room, he came down, and we were chatting about the opportunity that was presented. And he said, now you can't steer a parked car, which is probably the most Aussie thing from him to say, parked car, when I try and say that in the US. But you can't steer a parked car. You actually get in motion, actually get the thing rolling, and then God directs. And it's his way of saying to me, you know what, just step out here and just at least go in that direction, commit to it, and as you go and you start getting in motion serving God, he will direct you as you start putting your life in motion. And if you're stationary and you're doing nothing, he's not going to direct you and steer you because you're not going anywhere. You can't steer a parked car. And I thought that was good advice, and God used his advice to me to think through, okay, there. And then I'm reading, and I'm just reading my Bible as a 20-year-old. If you're a teenager or in your early 20s, can I suggest and encourage you, read your Bible. It will greatly help you. There are times where I've gone back and things that I hold to this very day that God showed me out of his word when I was a teenager. God speaks to his children even when they're teenagers and when they're young adults. You don't have to wait till you're an adult. You don't have to wait till you're like in your late 20s or 30s or 40s, and then you can start reading the Bible, and then God will start to speak to you. God speaks even younger than teenagers. God speaks to children. I'm just speaking from my experience as a teenager reading the Word of God. He spoke to me, and he would direct me through his Word, and the Holy Spirit would direct my path. And I was reading in the book of Acts when I was 20, and this was taking place about this time of year. I had the opportunity to go to this Bible college on the other side of the world, and I was reading, and I was reading the story about Felix and Festus and Paul, and that Paul was put into prison, and Festus, now I'm going to mix the two up. But one of them was saying, they trembled when Paul was preaching to them about temperance and righteousness and judgment to come. And then he said, I will hear thee again of this matter. And he says, when I have a convenient season, is what it says in there. When there is a convenient season, I will hear thee again of this matter. Like, he trembled in the moment, and then he waited for a convenient season. And do you know how long he was waiting? It says 2 years went by, and Paul was still in prison. You know, even after 2 years, when you're just waiting for the convenient season, and you're waiting for everything to be right, even after 2 years, he found out there wasn't a convenient time to actually make a decision to serve Jesus. Waiting and waiting, old Felix did, or Festus. Is it Festus or Felix? Or is it the other one? He trembled. Oh, you guys are as literate as I am. Great, good company here. Festus? Yes. So that guy, he said, I will hear thee again of this matter. And he waited for a convenient season, and after 2 years, that convenient season never came. Because you can say, I'm going to serve God. And if you're just waiting for everything to line up perfectly, guess what? Time passes by, and before you realize it, the convenient season has never come. Never come. 2 years went by and he was still in prison, and then he calls, and I was reading that, and God used it in my heart because I was thinking I'd surrendered 2 years ago, and I was waiting for like this convenient whatever what I was waiting for. I don't know what I was waiting for. I was just waiting for like the convenient season that everything would line up and everything would be easy, and this is the way it is. This is just all the ducks are in a row. But after 2 years, I was still just working at Farmer Jack's. I was still just saying I had been called to preach, and I was heading towards the ministry, and 2 years had gone by. And when you're 20 years of age, 2 years is a long time. When you're in your 40s, 2 years is yesterday. But when I was 20, I realized, man, 2 years of my life have gone by. 10% of my life to that point had just gone for me just waiting or just seeing what will happen with no clear plan. And it was like God was using it, saying, right, you need to actually get out of the boat, and you actually need to take a step of faith here, and you actually have some venturesome faith and go in this direction. And go in the direction that is opening up, and God is opening up. And so I went there. And man, I tell you, from that moment in my life, for the next 20-something years, I just found that if I just keep going in the direction that God is leading me to go, He directs my life. I don't know how I got to where I am now, doing what I'm doing, and did I plan everything out for my life? Married, 5 kids, got a house, working here, and came back to Australia. You say, how did my life work out? I just found that serving God, God will direct you as you go. Just get in motion serving Him, and you don't have to know where your life is going to end up. I don't know what the future of my life is, but I know who holds the future, and I just have to step out and trust Him, and He'll direct my paths. Get in motion. Get out of the boat. Take a risk. And that's what Peter teaches us, is that true faith is venturesome faith. The very nature of faith is to go and do something, to step out, not just to hear about it, but actually step out. Is that not how missions has worked? Is that not how churches have been started? Is that not how great works of God have taken place? Is someone didn't just believe that God was able, they actually got out of the boat and took a step of faith, risking sinking in the process. Do you know one thing that I have found with Peter? He may have sunk for a moment, but you notice he didn't die. This wasn't the end of Peter. This was just a momentary little bit, and God caught him and he was all okay, but he didn't die in it. His faith was challenged, and he learnt, no doubt, some great life lessons that would have gone with him to the grave, but he stepped out by faith. He took some risks. Spurgeon said it like this when he's talking about faith loves venturesome service. He says, faith is a vessel expressly built for the deep seas. She is not a coaster to keep close to the shore. She pushes out where she can neither see the shore nor fathom the depth. For she has a compass on board, and she looks up to the stars which God has fixed for her guidance. I like that. Faith is a vessel expressly built for the deep seas. Not just to stay close to the shore, but actually to launch out. Actually go out. He says He compelled them. Go out into the midst of the sea. And Jesus knew the storm that they'd face, but Jesus also knew that He was going to teach them a great thing in that storm. They launched out. They pushed out. They went. Faith is venturesome. And if we sit around waiting for just the perfect opportunity before we ever actually serve God, we're not going to do anything for Him. I have thought that in my own life, because again, my nature is I am not a risk taker. I'm a cautious guy. I want to know every step that I'm taking. I want the 5-year plan, and I want to match everything out. But faith isn't that. Faith is just get in motion. Just take a step. This is where God's calling you. You go in that direction. Take a step towards Him. Walk out on the seas. We have up here, reach out, raise up, reproduce. We have 2 things under reach out. We said this at the beginning of the year. Evangelism and benevolence. Evangelism, yeah, we're taking steps in evangelism. We're out knocking doors. We're out trying to take the gospel into our community by faith. Are we getting huge results? No. We're having good gospel conversations? Yes. Are we planting seeds and watering seeds? Yes. Are we seeing a harvest? No. But that's irrelevant. The point is that to take these to go by faith. The next one is benevolence. I spoke at the end of last year. I'd like to get this shed going and get some sort of benevolence and work out with Cottle and what they're doing with the city, and to get some of that food from that they're getting and be able to work it out here and have some sort of ministry of benevolence. And this is honestly the truth. This is how the process happens. In that shed, there's a lot of 3 desks, 3 cubicle desks that were in the school. I've had them I tried selling them, put them on Marketplace for like a couple of months now. Nothing. And you know what I think in my mind? Well, they haven't been sold, and if I can't sell them, there's no room up there. But that's not what faith does. Faith isn't just waiting for everything to line up in every step. Faith is, let's just clear that shed out. Anyway, let's put the desks down here. That's what I've been thinking about this week. Let's just clear it out, move those desks, bring them down here. We can store them in there. That's fine. Let's clear that part of the shed out, move it over. Let's actually just get on and do it. Because that's what faith is. Just go and do something rather than just saying, well, I'm going to wait for everything once they're sold, and then I have this money and this is lined up and then this next thing of the checklist. No, faith is like, God says, can we do this? He says, come to me. All right, step out and let's go do it. Raise up is about discipleship and servants. Raising up is that in school. And I think the same thing about a school, or at least some form of Christian education that parents are crying out for. And it's like, well, not this and not this, and we have to wait for this situation. But you know what? Faith is just taking a step and saying, hey, we might not have all the answers, but we're going to take a step in this direction. And we just trust Him that He'll take care of it. We'll just take little steps towards Him. That's what faith is. It's not the 5-year plan. It's not all the tick boxes that you have accumulated. It's actually just taking steps of faith and just stepping out of the boat, being prepared to fail. Because one thing that I'm averse to, and you might be too, is I'm averse to failure. I want to make sure that whatever I do is not going to fail. Then I'm going to go and do it. But true faith is venturesome. Hey, we're going to take a step of faith, and this may fail, but we're going to go in this direction. We've got to be risking the failure. Do you know farmers are great examples of what faith is? You know, they take the seed. Oh no, mini farmers, you're thinking on the big scale. But you know what farmers do? They go into their granary and they get their seed and then they toss it out onto the ground and then they pray for rain. Like, it's actually a massive risk to be a farmer. You're taking that, you're putting it into the ground and then hoping it'll germinate and come forth. That's risky. That's a lot of money. And if there's a crop failure, you're not going to get back and reap, and you're going to lose a lot of money. There is inherent risk in farming. But you know what Solomon says in Ecclesiastes? Cast your bread upon the waters, and after many days thou shalt see it again. And I think that has to do with the Nile River, that the Nile River would flood, right? And then as it would flood, all of the dirt that would fly down, all of that soil would go out, and they would cast their bread. It's like they would cast their seed and they're out onto these embankments that seem like to be flooded. And then as it would recede and it would germinate, and then all their crops would come forth. So cast your bread upon the waters, the flooded Nile, and there'll be come forth a harvest. It takes a lot of risk to do that. There is risk in life, and we can't escape it. Let me close with an illustration. May the 30th, 1792. A young Baptist pastor, 30 years of age, he pastored the Harvey Lane Baptist Church in Leicester in England. He stood up to preach at to a group of assembled Baptist ministers at a meeting in Nottingham, England. At the time, this preacher was not famous. He was a poor village pastor and a former cobbler, a shoemaker. In his spare time, he taught himself languages, and while repairing shoes, he studied geography and exploration reports and world populations and global religions and things like that. In his day, England's Baptist churches were often small, struggling, and self-focused, inward-focused. He got up to preach that day to those group of assembled Baptist ministers, and his text was this, Isaiah 54, verses 2 and 3. We're about to come to this on a Wednesday night. This was his text. Enlarge the place of thy tent, and let them stretch forth the curtains of thine habitations. Spare not, lengthen thy cords, and strengthen thy stakes, for thou shalt break forth on the right hand and on the left, and thy seed shall inherit the Gentiles, and make the desolate cities to be inhabited. The text deals with enlarge the place of thy tent, enlarge the cords, lengthen the cords, and expand outwards. This idea of the tent. Carey, who was the preacher, he made the application that day of the spread of the gospel and missionary expansion and faith-filled obedience. And he said, we need to expand our tent. We need to lengthen the rope. We need to be broader in our scope when it comes to the gospel. He had two famous points in that sermon. These are the point number one was this: expect great things from God. Point number two, you might know point number two if you know the phrase, attempt great things for God. That was his 2 points as he preached there about expanding the tent. Point one, expect great things from God. Point two, attempt great things for God. He got up and he preached to just a small gathering of Baptist ministers, and even in that group that were assembled there, they were not all on board. In fact, most of them looked at him like he was a nutter. And in fact, whether it was in that one or he preached it again in another meeting, it is said that there is a famous story that says that man was William Carey, by the way, and became the famed Baptist missionary to India. But there is a famous story that says Carey once raised the issue of missions at a ministers' meeting. Whether it was the same ministers' meeting, we're not sure. But an old minister supposedly responded, "Young man, sit down. When God pleases to convert the heathen, he will do it without your aid or mine." That was the response that he got. That is a hyper-Calvinistic thought that permeated those small Baptist churches in England at that time. Sit down. God can do it without us. And yet William Carey was so driven for world missions, he felt the call of God to get out of the boat and take a step towards those. He said the emotional impact, the sermon deeply affected several younger ministers that were present. Andrew Fuller, John Ryland, and Samuel Pierce. And he said that preaching was earnest and it was urgent and pleading and practical. And this was the main point that he pressed with them. Stop merely discussing missions. Do something. That was what he was trying to say to them. We talk about missions all the time. We talk about the gospel and evangelism, but let's stop talking and let's go do something. In essence, he's saying, men, let's get out of the boat and let's be venturesome and let's take a risk and let's go do something on the behalf of God. It's not that we are big. It's not that we have great strength. It's not that we have great ability, but we serve a great God. I am bringing together what he was saying rather than quoting him, but that's the drive of what he is. Let's expand our tents. Let's go do something. There's a famous thing that I think goes back to him about holding the rope. The famous follow-up meeting several months later in October 1792, ministers gathered again at Kettering, and the meeting was small, reportedly in the back parlor of a widow's house. Tiny little thing. And there they formed the Baptist Missionary Society, and the original offering collected was tiny, just over £13. Little bit of money that was handed in. This is what we're going to start here to our Baptist Missionary Society. But it launched the modern missionary movement. Soon after, Carey agreed to go to India. And before leaving, he reportedly told Andrew Fuller and the others, "I will go down into the pit if you will hold the ropes. You be rope holders, and I'll go down into the pit. I'm going to go to India with the gospel, and you stay back here, and you be rope holders. You support financially, and you help in prayer, but you hold the rope of this mission." And he went out and did the missions, and went to India, lost his wife, lost a child, went through 3 marriages because of death and heartaches, and labored there in India with the gospel. But you know what? Out of that, many later missionaries were inspired directly or indirectly by William Carey, including Adoniram Judson, who went to Burma, Hudson Taylor, who went to China, David Livingstone, who went to Africa, C.T. Studd, who went to China, India, and Africa. Here is William Carey saying, you know what, we may be small and there is no reason that this should work, but I have a great burden of God to go take the gospel beyond our little tent and to reach out to the Gentiles and expand the tent, and I'm willing to go. And faith in him was venturesome, and he went and did something, and it's grown, and the missionary movement has grown through the 1800s and the 1900s. Gospel has gone everywhere, to Japan and to Philippines and to different places. Missionaries have gone to take the gospel. I still love about Hudson Taylor, no, Adoniram Judson. He went to Burma. He went to Burma. And there is, to this day, Chin churches, and they're Burmese. They're Burmese Baptist churches, and they trace their heritage to Hudson Taylor, Adoniram Judson, which I just closed my notes. The guy that went there, Adoniram Judson. They trace it to Adoniram Judson, who went to Burma, following the example of William Carey. These are men that stepped out by faith and did something amazing, because true faith is venturesome. It is risk-taking. It is prepared to fail, but to follow God. And the God who never fails will meet the person who is prepared to fail. And even though you sink, he is but a hand away to pull you out. So I say to you today, you say, oh, I believe that Peter walked on the water. Okay, great. I do too. But are you boat bound? Are you prepared to be boat bound? Or are you prepared to be sea sunk? Oh, it's a terrible way of saying that. But are you prepared to take a risk where you might actually sink and fail? That's what faith does. Faith takes a step. True faith is venturesome. True faith actually wants to launch out and do something, even though it doesn't make sense. Be clear about what God's calling you to do, and then, may I encourage you today, take the breath, stand up from the boat, climb over the edge, and go in the direction that the Lord is calling you to do it. And he'll meet you there. Would you bow your heads and your hearts before him? You might have weak faith, small faith, but take a step of faith